Hi, and welcome back to Cloak of Obscurity. We've finally reached chapter 12, For Love and Money. I'm a fool, I said, watching the grass around the stone wither and die. I'm a fat, red-headed fool. I don't understand, Dolores said. What is that thing? It's called a death stone, I said. They're found in the western wastes, cast up by volcanoes. A toy of the evil one, I'm sure. See how the grass it's touching is already starting to die? This is what killed the fish and the duck, Dolores. But how did it get into our pond? The old woman asked. I pointed up. It slid down the roof after Allison threw it out the window. Allison threw it? I saw the scars on her fingers, where she had touched it. I just didn't realize at the time what had caused them. Dolores shook her head. I still don't understand, she said. What was Allison doing with this thing, and how did it get into our house? Well, she must have found it somewhere in her father's room, his bed most likely. I'm guessing that this was the cause of his illness, I said. Roger Tanner was murdered. Murdered? Dolores gasped. But who would want to... Oh, my God. No, Master Edward, you don't think that young Malcolm... She could see in my face that I did. Allison must have found the stone before Malcolm had a chance to get it out of the room, I said. She may not have known exactly what it was, but she could guess well enough what it had been used for. The poor woman swooned. I caught her against my chest as she fell, and half carried her out through the house into the street. Next door, Dennis Cobbler was sitting in front of his father's shop, hammering the sole onto a boot. Dennis, I called, can you help us? He looked rather startled to see me there, supporting a bewildered-looking Dolores on my arm. Master Edward, he said, jumping to his feet, whatever is the matter with that poor woman? She's had a nasty shock, I said, and she's probably sick as well. Let us in. Not waiting for a response from the dumbfounded youth, I pushed past him into the house. Their shop was almost identical to the Tanners. I took Dolores back to the kitchen. As we passed the stairs, I heard the sound of an infant crying in one of the bedrooms. Dennis had lost no time in moving his family home with him. I helped Dolores to a seat on a bench against the wall. Aunt Nan was in the kitchen with a couple of servant girls. Why, it's the wizard, began Aunt Nan. Master Edward, what a pleasure. Good woman, we have a very serious problem here, I said, cutting her off. Dennis crowded in the kitchen behind me. Just what is going on here? I turned on my heel and said, Dennis, do you trust me? The servant girl started chirping, but I silenced them with a look. Dennis, I repeated, do you trust me? Well, of course I trust you. You saved my wife. Good. Now do exactly as I say. No one, and I repeat, no one is to go back onto the property next door until I or another wizard return. Is that understood? Why? Asked Dennis. I'll explain later. Or Dolores will. She knows. I mopped my brow. Dennis, this is important. A matter of life and death. His gray eyes grew very wide. I want you to go to Castle Belcamp. Go to the castle? Yes, to the castle. And tell Master Gabriel to come down here and tell him to bring a lead-lined casket. But he's the king's wizard, put in Aunt Nan. Yes, I said, and he'll want to know about this as soon as possible. Where are you going, Master Edward? I have to close up the shop next door, I said, to keep people out of the house, and then I have to go home and fetch some things. Oh, if any of you see Malcolm, try to stall him and steer clear of his fists. He's got a wicked left hook. Dennis was still several steps behind. What do you need to fetch? He asked. But I didn't stop to answer him. I was already on my way out. I chased a would-be thief out of the unattended front room of the Tanners, then locked all of the doors from the outside, moving the tumblers into place with my thoughts. I headed for home. I didn't even own even a lead-lined casket, much less a gold one. But even if I couldn't contain the Death Stone until I could hand it over to Lord Gabriel, I ought to be able to find something that would help Dolores. What to do about Malcolm was a bit more problematic. As I rounded the corner onto Upper Water Street, I saw someone standing in the middle of the road in front of the Snake and Egg. It was Anna. As soon as she spotted me, she began pelting towards me as fast as her plump legs could carry her. "Master Edward," she gasped. "Oh, Master Edward, I've not known what to do. I've been waiting for you all this time." Her breasts were heaving with exertion, and I found myself having difficulty hearing her words. I know it wasn't right of me to read your letter, Master," she panted, "but I was that curious, I was, just to see if I could, and now, oh, Master, it's awful." "What is it?" I asked. "Why, this!" she exclaimed. Now I noticed she was waving a grimy scrap of parchment in her hand. "Master Nat was all ready to go out after the bastard. Oh, begging your pardon, but that's exactly what he said. But Sadie said that we had to leave this to you, you being a wizard and all, and we sent Dick round to your mother's to fetch you, but he came back as you weren't there, and I've been waiting." I had never heard so many words from that young woman's mouth in the entire 2 years I had known her. "May I see it?" I asked. I took the note. Anna kept on talking. "This boy, he brought it right after you left, see, and I held on to it, thinking I'd give it to you when you got back, but when you didn't, well, I got curious, in case it might be important." It was important. "Wizard," the note said, "don't think I don't know what you did. You're all in this together. I can see that now. But you're the one I want. Meet me on the cliff where Allie died. Come alone, or the elf bitch follows Allie. Malcolm." "Who brought this?" I asked. "Like I told you, some boy," Anna said. "He'd been paid to. Didn't know what it said, I'd think. Now, where are you going?" I didn't stay long enough for her to finish her question. I had just enough presence of mind to know I couldn't go tearing off after Malcolm unprepared. Anyone capable of slowly poisoning his sweetheart's father while living in the same house was not only crafty and patient, but utterly cold-hearted as well. I feared he had already killed Lee, but just in case he hadn't, I wanted to take every precaution I could that might give me a chance to save her. Sadie tried to corner me on the way up the stairs, but the look on my face drove her back. I went to my room for supplies. Malcolm had bested me twice, but both times he had caught me by surprise. This time the surprise would be mine. I snatched up everything I thought I might need as Sadie hovered anxiously outside my door. "Send someone up to the Tanners," I told her as I pushed back past her towards the stairs. "Let them there know what's happened, and you might want to call the city guards." "Guards?" said Sadie. "Why? What's happened?" I didn't even try to explain. "And make sure someone lets Lord Gabriel know he'll have to take care of the Death Stone." "Take care of what?" Sadie demanded as I left. The sun was sinking in the west by the time I reached the North Bridge. I wondered, as I went out of the city, if the same lackadaisical guard who had only thought to notice Allison's beauty had been on duty when Malcolm and Lee had left, and if he had ignored Lee because she was plain in his eyes. I wondered if Lee were still alive. I wondered if I could keep Malcolm from killing me. I wondered if I were capable of killing him. Most of all, I wondered how I was going to find him in the dense thickets of the cliffs. I couldn't simply blunder along as I'd done while looking for the site of Allison's death. If Malcolm heard me coming, all my planning would be useless. I made my way down one of the larger deer paths. I wish the dreams I'd been having had seen fit to give me at least cryptic hints as to what I should do now. Something moved in the underbrush. I looked down and I saw a small black shape rummaging among the dried leaves. A rat. But not just any rat. It was quite obviously Lee's pet, as rats did not ordinarily grow that large by foraging for themselves. Perhaps it had come to find me. But that was ridiculous. A dog or even a cat, maybe, might be sent for help. Not a rat. Still, if the rat were here, Lee couldn't be far away. Perhaps she'd let it go. She was sentimental enough about it to think it could bring me to her. Or perhaps it had fled when she died. I shoved that morbid thought away and moved cautiously towards the rat. If Flea were alive, she'd want me to catch it for her. I tried to imitate the soft clucking sound I'd heard her make to it. The rat paused and looked up, sniffing in the direction of the sound, and then scampered up to my boots. Fighting back my natural revulsion, I grabbed the rat and stuffed it into my bag. I hope I'd find Lee alive to return it to her before it pissed in my spell gear. The trail branched off near where the rat had been. I followed it. It was beginning to get dark in the thickets. I heard voices ahead and moved more slowly. Peering through a gap in the undergrowth, I spotted a clearing on the edge of the cliffs. Malcolm was pacing back and forth. "He must not care what happens to you," he said, "or he'd be here by now." "He'll come," Lee said, quiet and confident. "He'll come. And he's stronger than you know. You can't just kill him with that knife." Malcolm moved out of sight. I crept closer to the clearing and reached into my bag. Stifling a yelp when my fingers brushed the rat, I drew out the supplies I'd brought. "I don't have to kill him," Malcolm said. "I just have to kill you." Silently, I mouthed my incantations and sprinkled a bit of blue powder on the ground. "So why don't you do it?" Lee asked defiantly. Malcolm barked a short, bitter laugh. "What? And not give him a chance to say goodbye to his lover?" "I'm not his lover," Lee said. Now I was moving silently along the edge of the clearing. Malcolm's back was to me. I could barely make out Lee's tiny form in the near darkness. She was huddled on the ground, probably bound hand and foot. Malcolm towered over her. "Don't lie to me, bitch," he said. "I've seen the way you look at him, heard the way you say his name." "You're mad," she said. I couldn't make out her features. "And you can't get away with this, because if you kill me and Master Edward, you'll certainly be caught and hung." "Not if I kill myself first," Malcolm said. "What reason have I to live now that Allie's gone?" "Hasn't there been enough killing?" I said. Malcolm spun around, trying to find the source of my voice. At the end of the path, he saw my form standing out against the dark brambles. "So," he said, "you finally decided to grace us with your presence." "Why are you doing this, Malcolm?" I asked. "You killed Allie," he said. "Allie killed herself," I countered. That's what you want folk to believe," Malcolm said. "I suppose you think you can kill me here, make it look like another suicide, and keep your damn secret safe." "What secret?" I said. "You're the only one who thinks I killed Allison. I haven't got any secret." Malcolm laughed again. "Come now, wizards, it's just the three of us here, and none of us are leaving alive. You can stop pretending now." "You're the one who needs to stop pretending," I said. "I know you murdered your master. If any of us here is to blame for Allison's death, it's you. She killed herself because of what you did." As I'd hoped, my words drove Malcolm to fury. Drawing a knife from his belt, he leapt at the figure standing at the trailhead and fell headlong into the briars. Dropping my cloak on the ground, I stepped between him and Lee. He turned over and glared at me. "You cowardly sneak." I drew myself up to my full height. "You call me cowardly, and you poisoned an old man? I found the death stone you used on Roger Tanner in the fish pond. The fish pond? Malcolm said. Is that where it went? I thought you'd already taken it when I couldn't find it. Why would I want it? I said. Dolores was with me when I found it, and she knows what you did. She was telling the Cobbler household everything when I left, and they were going to go for the city guard. By now, I wouldn't be surprised if the king himself knows you're a murderer. Malcolm started laughing. The king? He gasped. The king himself? You great idiot! You must be innocent after all. I've been telling you that, I said. What made you think I wasn't? What would I possibly have against Allison? You needed her silence. Why? To protect your cousin. What? You fat fool, Malcolm said. Who do you think sold me the damn stone to begin with? Your loving cousin, that's who. 100 gold pieces he took from me. Do you know how many years it took me to win that? I'd offered it to old Roger for Allie, but he'd refused. So I figured I'd buy her another way. I was stunned. I'd known Damien was greedy and ambitious, but cold-blooded enough to stoop to selling poison? His father was my mother's brother. He was my kin. Malcolm charged. I raised my hand. His knife flew off into the brushes, and he skidded to a stop a few feet away. I can kill you, I said. I can blast you into 1,000 bloody chunks where you stand. I couldn't, and wouldn't even if I could. But he didn't know that. You're bluffing, he said, taking 2 paces towards me. Test me, I said. I realized I was actually taller than he was. Magic aside, I could probably take him in a fair fight. Come on, I goaded. Are you going to admit you're beaten? Maybe I am, Malcolm said with a sullen smirk, but at least I'll have the satisfaction of dragging you and yours down with me. He sank to his knees in apparent submission. He was quick with his hands. Before I could even blink, he drew a small leather knife, razor sharp, from his belt and flung it past me. I heard Lee cry out in pain. I heard my own voice raised in anger and saw Malcolm's body fly across the clearing to smash into a cluster of trees. I passed out. And yes, I'm a bit of a skunk. I'm going to leave you here at a cliffhanger. See you next week.